items. 3199, Rule 5.5 analysis.
All right, so as follow-up to to last week's council meeting, what we've tried to do is put together the agenda based on the items that have been raised by the council members. So hopefully I've captured all of the issues at least we want to address this evening. I know there's still some outstanding issues. Obviously, we don't have the status on the West Virginia DEP permit modification yet. So, but anyway, so I've clustered them into these four groups. Rule 5.5 analysis, there was a lot of discussion about the spreadsheets, trying to do a little bit of a side-by-side analysis. So we'll have John Kunkel and Kristen help us walk through that. There's a request for sanitary sewer service. There was an updated letter that we received from Rockwool, so you'll see that in your packet. And then there's still some conversation about flows and reconciliation, so we'll talk a little bit about that. We'll provide an update on where the state financing package is and what we know about it. And then there has been this question raised regarding manufacturing waste, I believe, and Bob, if I've got this one wrong, it's basically the floor drains and how do we deal with whatever waste is going into that system and where does it ultimately go. So Kristen will be ready to address that issue. Okay. So that's the broad agenda. And so with that, maybe we'll start, if everybody's ready, we'll start with the Rule 5.5 analysis. I've placed in front of you a legal size copy of the spreadsheet that you see on the screen. It's a little hard to see, but if people want to point to or refer to the screen, we want to make sure that was available for the public to see. That document is also or has been uploaded to the system already, so anybody who's viewing the meeting can see the spreadsheet as well. So maybe with that, John?
Al, thank you for having me down to the workshop this evening. Based on the last time I was before you, there was a conversation about a side-by-side analysis between the state financing option and the Rule 5.5 option. And I tried to encapsulate that on the new analysis that's before you. If you'd like, I could run through it in a summarized fashion to explain it.
And John, if I could ask you, just for the people that are listening.
The first column is, well, okay, the projection period is for 25 years. That is what is currently being offered by the state on the state financing. So I wanted to compare this 25-year period to what would happen under Rule 5.5. This first column represents the estimated annual gross revenues to be derived from new customer connections to the extension to the Rockwell territory. The second column represents revenues that would be required to fall under the Rule 5.5 reimbursement. The third column represents what the Charlestown Utility Board would be able to retain of the gross revenues. It represents the O&M portion of the revenues and the current agreement with the state calls for the Charlestown Utility Board to retain 61% of those revenues. The fourth column represents the leak adjustment that the Charlestown Utility Board can retain from the reimbursed revenues under Rule 5.5. So the gross revenues less the leak adjustment see that as we go through the years, not only will the utility be able to retain the leak adjustment, but they also will be able to obtain released revenues from, because of the reimbursement period. If you notice here, for instance, the first freed up revenues in 2027 pretty much represents the first year required reimbursement of 5.5. So again, this column represents what would be freed up after the reimbursement periods have expired. The next column simply represents the amount of revenues that can be retained by the utility board under Rule 5.5. And those revenues, of course, represent the leak adjustment plus the freed up revenues after the reimbursement period is expired. What I have done is because also because of the key assumption that every dollar of revenue, 61% of that, or 61 cents, needs to be devoted towards O&M. I wanted to compare the total revenues retained and 61% of the reimbursement revenues, and subtract those from what has been retained by the utility. And the net of those represent either an operating deficit or surplus to Charlestown Utility Board. You can see that over the period of the bond issue, the retained revenues are about $14.5 million based on the state financing. Under Rule 5.5, it's about $13.8 million. So the gross revenues that are able to be retained is greater under the state bond issue. Now, I decided to do a net present value calculation on each because they're unequal revenue streams, and they are over a period of 25 years. And using a 5% discount rate or cost of capital rate, I came up with a net present value of about $6.9 million under the state financing, and about $4.9 million under Rule 5.5. Is there any questions so far in the analysis, or anything that's not clear to you? Again, just to be clear, I want to point out that the deficit under 5.5 represents the need for 61% of all revenues devoted to O&M. And these deficits can only come from utility-wide surplus or other customer revenues. So that is the differential between the two that I've calculated. flows would not be subject to Rule 5.5. So I did not include them in this model, but I did show the present value effect of both the retained and both the state financing and Rule 5.5 to give you a picture of all revenues from the extension. And by doing that, the present value of the state financing about 7.7 million. The present value of 5.5 amounted to about 5.8 million. One other factor I do want to point out about the initial Rockwell revenues. Of course, under the state, and both under 5.5, the O&M is a necessary component of the budget. So it really, that portion of it really isn't what we term relevant cost. But there also, I did want to point out there was residual on the initial Rockwell flows. You can see it's about 957,000. What I did do as a possibility is show that the amount of the Charlestown Utility Board's share of this extension, which we've calculated at 442,000, could be repaid by those residual revenues. If I so desired, I could also use those residual revenues to show an earlier payoff on the state financing. I did not do that as somewhat of a comfort margin on that. The state financing under this model, $10 million. The gross revenues, $23.5 million. The initial Rockwell flows, $2,452,000. Less what's retained by the utility board for the O&M, less the O&M on the Rockwell additional flows, means that essentially if all the assumptions that went into projecting the revenues turned out to be actual experience, the state would be paid off their $10 million in 25 years. They'd actually be paid off a little bit sooner than that. You can see I made an adjustment in 2044, and that adjustment relates to the state financing being paid off a little earlier than the 25 years. Under the Rule 5.5 scenario, Rockwell would be required to deposit with the utility board for the construction about $9.6 million, and I think that got cut off.
Yeah, you scroll down.
unreimbursed, non-cash deposit that ultimately would show as contributed capital to the utility board of approximately $3.7 million. And again, as with the state financing, this considers that all of the growth projections would actually transpire.
So a couple of quick questions, if I may. Obviously, you've got growth cooked into your analysis, right? What are the growth rates? What is the growth rate, and what is it based on?
The growth rate is based on the analysis by Chester Engineers. I believe is in your package, and it represents new customer connections to the extension, not only Rockwell, but a lot of
Rockwool, right?
Rockwell, a lot of subdivisions and things of that nature that be new customer connections.
So was there a specific rate, or was it just based on, they said, like, this development would come online at this time, and so on and so forth?
Bob, it's page 27
I
of
don't
the
know that
packet.
there was a specific rate, but each particular territory had a certain build-out assigned to it.
Right, so I can answer that. What we did was we took the basis of design for the project. We coordinated with Jefferson County, City of Ranson, and looked at our strategic plan entitled developments, developments that we anticipated, within the 30-year timeframe. All of those were the basis of the calculations and the projections.
Okay. And so the state loan was based on that, right? That work by Chester, as far as the growth analysis?
Yes.
But both the state financing and 5.5.
Right, it's an equal comparison, and I get that. I appreciate that for sure.
I'll just add that it does show significant growth. Those revenues probably represent probably over 10% of the current revenues of the sewer department.
Okay. Again, this is for my own edification. So when we get down to the 5.5 portion of this, repayment of the Rockwool deposit. Rockwool deposit's $9.5 million. The gross reimbursement revenues, now if the growth is higher than we anticipated, then that 6.3 million would be higher, correct?
That's correct.
And if it's lower, would it be lower?
It would be lower. A higher growth rate under 5.5 is somewhat disadvantageous because you're only, again, one of the fundamental assumptions is that for every dollar of revenue you have to have 61
Right.
cents will go in. So if you have a higher growth rate, particularly in those earlier years, where you're only retaining 7.32% instead of the 61%, these deficits will increase under 5.5. Under the state financing, there's no risk. You only pay whatever's left after 61%.
Let's go back to that statement you made just before that. If the revenues increase more than what we've cooked into our analysis, then yeah, we would still be able, we would keep the, what did you say, 5.7%, but that 5.7% would represent a higher number, right? In theory.
It would, but the 61% less the leak adjustment of 7.32% would also represent a much higher.
Yeah, but I guess what I'm trying to say is the revenue would not be less necessarily. It would be a smaller percentage of the overall, or be the same percentage of overall. But, I mean, if the growth was higher than we projected, right, Rockwool would get more money, but so would we, even though it would be enough to do the 61%. I get that. Am I right in that assumption?
I believe you're correct.
Okay. So if the revenues were higher, then the unreimbursed deposit, the contributing capital, would be less. And if the revenues were less, then it would be higher.
That's correct.
Okay. You may not be able to answer this particular question, and I hope I'm not jumping the gun here. The money that's been expended for the engineering costs under 5.5, how would that be funded under 5.5?
My assumption was that was part of the $10 million. As you know,
But I'm talking about the 5.5. It's only 9.5 million from Rockwool. Right.
right, but another $500,000 for Charlestown Utility Board to bring it up to that.
Okay, so that would be an out of pocket then?
So the assumption that is being made is that those sunk costs are part of that. Now, whether that's likely or remote, you have had a formal request from Rockwell.
Rockwool.
Rockwell.
Rockwell might be getting upset that we keep calling him.
Yeah, for the extension, and it's probably questionable whether they want to include much in that project except costs that serve themselves.
Well, I mean, engineering costs would be engineering costs, right? I guess my question is, because the engineering costs have already been experienced, would that be part of the overall?
It is, currently it is part of the $10 million, both under the state financing and the Rule 5.5 financing.
Okay, so just to be clear, I apologize, I'm a little dense on this. So if the 5.5, if we did the 5.5, then that $1 million that has already been sunk into the project would be covered under the Rockwool deposit. Is that correct?
Well, so let me just clarify. Obviously, yes, those project costs, assuming that the project is built as currently designed. So those project costs would be applicable either under 5.5 or state financing,
Okay, so,
if the project's built as currently designed and approved.
But if they go a different route, if they decide,
Then
no,
that
we're not going to do
changes
this.
the discussion
okay.
about the project costs that have been expended to date.
but wouldn't we, I mean, not we, but you as a utility would say, this is the route, this is how we're going to bring in that service. Now, my understanding is, and again, I'm just being a little dense here, my understanding is, basically, we've designed a system to not only take care of that area up there, which includes Rockwool, right, but
Yes.
some of the other projects that would help out too.
Yes.
So so Rockwell says, hey, listen, we need this sewer, and here's the $9.5 million. Would we be say, okay, well, this is how we're going to build it? Or how does that relationship work?
That's an interesting question. I think that we would certainly have to look at how we would be able to fund the difference between what Rockwell would need and the project is currently designed.
Okay,
So if we are in that situation where we have to determine if we're dealing with the main line extension request from Rockwell that is basically only to serve their facility, then we're going to have to really sit down and figure out which direction we want to go.
but our analysis is based on growth, right? So it has to be more than just to service them.
Well, yes, the project as designed and our analysis is strictly on, the project and the state financing. That's where we started with all of this. If we are it changes the discussion if we're really looking at the utility board having to fund and city council having to fund the difference between the project as currently designed and a mainline extension request.
But I guess what I'm saying is, our analysis on the comparison, side-by-side comparison, we're assuming a certain growth.
Right.
Yes, yeah. I mean, that is the only true analysis that we've done is the $10.5 million project, which considers a tremendous amount of growth in that region.
But one of the risks that 5.5 poses is, yes, we're under both scenarios. We're saying a $10 million project would connect all the customers in the projections. It could be that when the agreement is finalized with Rockwell, that to serve them, say it might only cost $8 million. That other $2 million would have to be financed by the utility board, and it would, this isn't, it's cut off up here, but it would increase that $500,000 that
Right.
is shown.
So that brings me to two conclusions, if you will. It seems to me that under 5.5, it would be in Rockwell's, did I say it right? Rockwell's best interest to do it as we designed, because that would have future more revenue for them, right? And that my second conclusion, if they didn't, if they said, no, we just want a line to serve us, we ponied up the $2 million to make it the way we want it, then they wouldn't be entitled to that future growth revenue, correct?
Well, under 5.5, I think they're putting up 9.5 million, and they are not recovering 3.7 million. Under the state financing, they're not putting anything up.
No, I get all that. I guess what I'm saying is, based on our analysis, if I'm Rockwell and I'm going to do 5.5, I'm going to say, hey, listen, I want the most revenue as possible, so my donation to the utilities is not $3 million, right? So I would say, well, let's go along with what you did, because that's potentially the most maximum return. If I didn't do that, if I said, no, I'm just going to pay for the line to serve me, then any future revenue that we put in because we did it the way we wanted to do it, they wouldn't be entitled to that payback, or would they? That's the question I'm asking.
No, they
Okay.
are not entitled to any payback on the utilities portion of the project.
Okay.
But as far as standing in Rockwell's shoes, under the state financing, it is risk-free for them. Under 5.5, if these projections would hold true, they would ultimately be out $3.5 million.
I think my last question on 5.5, I apologize, you guys, but, so let's say it's the 5.5 route. That's the route that not everybody decides, but that's the route we're going to go. What is the city council's role in the 5.5? What is the city council expected to do with 5.5?
If 5.5, if all that Roxanne wants to participate in is enough to get service for itself, and it doesn't want to do the, doesn't want to put the money up for the bigger project, that does not require PSC approval. The rules require an agreement between the parties.
I have to speak into the
And
mic.
I'll explain the details of the agreement here in a minute. But it does not require submitting that agreement to the PSC for approval. So presumably it would be between the utility board and Roxanne. For a project like this, I don't think the utility board intends to do it without making, at least you all know what we're doing. But then under rule, they put the money up front, the utility designs it, presumably the utility is going to pull in, Charlestown's going to pull in Hatch Chester to do it, and they're probably going to use as a basis, seems logical, the engineering plan that's something that will accomplish the same goal, as the growth occurs out there, and presumably you would have to use traditional revenue bond financing to do it.
So if Rockwell goes to 5.5, please, I'm a little dense. So Rockwell does the 5.5 and they're like, look, we're just interested in you serving us. The role of the city council is nothing.
You wouldn't be borrowing any money, or anything. Now, we believe, at least the analysis shows, that we're probably, the utility board's probably going to walk in here fairly quickly and say, look, we're going to have a rate increase because we've got this.
All right, that's going to be,
Is the answer
But
to your
under a
question,
reduced, under a reduced project, if it's only for RUCs, I don't want to say nobody could hook into that line, because you're talking about a 5-mile extension. There's got to be a little bit of growth in there. How much, that's an engineering issue. So you would potentially get some revenue back, but, not much.
so under 5.5 also then, if Rockwell says, look, we're just going to pay what serves us, we think it's in the best interest of the city and the residents and the ratepayers, well, we're going to expand it to do the original what Chester said, then what is the role of the city
Then
council?
that is an alternate mainline extension agreement.
I got that.
Okay, and that changes the rules a little bit. An alternate main extension agreement, which would be the big project. Let's say they come in and say, we will participate in funding the big project, but we want to move under 5.5. Since you've expanded the scope of the project, in my opinion, that agreement would have to be approved with the Public Service Commission. Now, again, the agreement is filed by the utility board, and the direct parties are the utility board and the developer, but it is a case at the Public Service Commission.
So there's no way that if Rockwell says, look, we just want to pay for what'll service us, but we say in our minds, hey, listen, that's fine, we'll take your $7 million or whatever it is, but we're going to add more money to it because we're going to make it serve.
You could do that if you wanted to. The part that involves.
Would that involve the
Does
PSC?
not need the PSC at all, and because you are one of the larger utilities and an exempt utility, you could then have the engineers, presumably you use this same plan, and you would go out and fund the difference between what Roxy puts in the pot and what is going to be needed to do the project as a regular project.
And so that would require a
And that
bond.
does not require PSC approval because you're one of the larger utilities.
So that will require a bond,
A bond is
rate increase, and that would be our role, those two things.
right, and you would almost assuredly have to, depends on how much your share of that total project is, but you would probably have a rate increase of some type attached to it. How much, I don't know, depends on
I got it.
what the engineers, how they, what the split cost.
Would that also be a project ordinance that would come back to council?
Yes.
As well?
Well,
Okay.
and that would be something we'd have to ask John. You have adopted a project ordinance. Now, it presumed a much, the total project. If you change the scope of the project substantially, I'm assuming, again, that's your bond council's opinion, you'd have to pass another.
Okay.
When Ranson had this deal, prior to it coming to us, they were going the alternate mainline extension route, is that correct?
They were. They are, Mike, they are not one of the larger utilities, so they have to go through the PSC. And they decided that they did not want to file a certificate case, which normally they would do for a project that size. And they had filed an alternate main extension agreement. And that agreement was never approved by the Public Service Commission. It was filed, I believe, in the fall of 2017. I can't remember the exact date. I may be off on that. And nothing happened to it. It just sat there.
Because they knew, the PSC knew that we were going to be taking the project.
Utility consolidation was coming, and there may have been other reasons. I
And then these gallons per day estimates, it's about 1 million gallons per day of assumptions on,
Yes.
and the developers in JUI had pretty significant input into what those assumptions are, right?
No, we did, I mean, we did meet with them, but their requests were 10 times what the realistic development projections were. So as an example, the line is built for about 6,000 EDUs, equivalent dwelling units. Their request was in the magnitude of 20,000. Clearly, looking at the plant capacities, ideally in 2030, we'll be looking at an expansion of the treatment plants, but those were very, very unrealistic development projections.
And then they paid for a study, right? Green Conway, am I getting the name right? Conway Green, something like that?
I believe Greenway did some analysis on behalf of Arcadia and the Harvest Hills development. And again, we met with them, but we relied our projections on realistic entitled developments. We did a comparison of even just an average yearly development trend, and they were comparable to what we have in our projections.
And then when Ranson had this project, they weren't really willing to entertain any of the additional stuff that we're doing, correct? With these assumptions. They were just doing basically Roxel and Burr Industrial Park.
Right, yeah, I think it was basically the Jefferson Orchards property originally. You can look at the various options in the original design report that Hatchester prepared. So it varied from Rockwell only to, a larger group. And then we did have additions as we were looking at the bigger picture with the PSD consolidation and other developments that could connect, looking at better ways to serve that area.
Mike, one thing, you said the Burr Industrial Park, I think, at least initially, when Ranson proposed this, they wanted to serve Ranson customers. It did not include the Burr Industrial Park.
Okay.
And one of the crazy things about this, the district's project, built and revised.
Hoy, could you come to the mic if you can, just to make sure.
The district's project, which we're now have taken over and we're going to revise it, it didn't serve the Burr Industrial Park. The craziest thing is, the one thing everybody I think in the county wants is to see the Burr Bardane Industrial Park to expand, because they've had requests off and on for years out there, and there's a restriction in the line to get the sewerage. You got capacity at the plant. Neither the district's proposal and the subject of the 2017 case or Ranson's proposal serves the Burr Bardane Industrial Park. I don't know what I have, I have my opinion about it, but that is kind of that's just the way it was.
And just because you kind of, get all the feelings behind the scenes that we don't get, the developers were fairly frustrated with Ranson that they weren't including them in any of this. And is it safe to say they were pleased when CTUB took it over and included them in the development?
Not necessarily. Nobody opposed the Ranson acquisition by the district. There were a group of developers. I think there were actually three interveners in the case for Charlestown to take over the district. There were three. One was an entity controlled by Lee Schneider. He has a sewer plant, a little project with a package plant out near Jefferson High School somewhere. There was a developer that has the Harvest Hills project, and the name escapes me of the developer now. And then there was a consortium of developers. They all intervened, and they opposed the acquisition by Charlestown of the district. The commission, issued an order approving it. They're the ones that appealed to the Supreme Court of Appeals. And we never could really figure out why, because we we tried to reassure them, our project will give you all the, all the capacity you need to get there. But in any event, that caused a delay, and it caused a several-month delay, probably close to a 6-month delay, in Charlestown acquiring the assets of the Public Service District.
Well, if I did not want to speak this evening, because I'm long-winded, so I prepared some questions, and I didn't want to spend all my time getting into the weeds, but I would appreciate if you could answer those questions. And Daryl actually was able to project them up. And John, I only have 3 copies of that. I ran out of paper as I was printing them and running out of the house. So if you don't mind, I would like to just put these up here and then ask you to respond to some of them. I know I've asked for some of them in the past, but I'll go over that. And real quickly, first one was basically just fill out this table, which is I tried to incorporate all the projects and plans that I thought that we had on the shelf right now, and thought, how does this impact when you look at them all together or separately, whether it's going to be a rate increase, a rate decrease, or no rate at all, no rate impact at all, because that does go into my factoring of how I'm going to vote on this project. The second question goes to this interesting document, the design report by Chester. And the second paragraph, it says that the West Virginia Infrastructure and Jobs Development Council is seeking to establish a 1,000-acre industrial park in West Virginia's Eastern Panhandle region. In support of that goal, Ranson and Jefferson County Development Authority negotiated an agreement to bring Roxol, a manufacturer of cement-based insulation materials, to a 150-acre site on the 390-acre Jefferson Orchards property. And that then led me to question, well, where are the other 690 acres? And so what I did was, Daryl, can I skip ahead to your chart? I took your next page. I took your chart that listed all of your developments there. The next page, and I created just a chart and listed everything plus your average gallons. And the second question that I had was basically just fill out this chart. And question 2 says, or question 3 says, which of these developments are incorporated into those 1,000 acres? The next one says, how many EDU units per property? I think I requested that previously. The other question is, when were those EDU units requested? The year. Another is, how many EDU units are currently being utilized by that property? And then the other next one is, how many of these properties are expected to also receive state sewer financing, which I assume the answer is probably none, but I wanted to throw that out there. And then the next to the last column was, if any of these properties do a 5.5 agreement with developers using kind of the similar conditions that we'd use with Rockwell, whether doing so will trigger a ratepayer increase impact. So that's basically just to fill out box, and I'd appreciate it if you could do that. The question number 10 was, I kind of want to get back to that 42% or 42 cent increase for every 1,000 gallons, and where that comes from. And I noticed in the package that you provided for this meeting, I think you answered that, but I'd like to get a little more clarity on that. I've gotten quite a few phone calls from often very senior folks who are scared to death that we are increasing their rates and going to throw them out of their houses. And I would love for you to tell us if that is an accurate number, or is it being recalculated, or will have to be. Moving on, page 3 asks the question, you've opted for option 6, which is a hybrid plan. And it basically says, are there going to be 3 pump stations for that plan? And I showed on one of the pages the design that Chester put in for that line, which incorporates 3 pump stations along with Roxel's small pump station. And it basically asks, is this the design that you're going for? And since there is this extra pump station that's to the east of the Rockwell facility, if that is the plan that we're going with, why is that here? And what does that pump station do? And why isn't the Rockwell facility pump station powerful enough to move that? The other question then goes to, it remains on that pump station, but a different question as to whether the pump station, whether it's actually needed. And then, let's see. Next set of questions kind of go to, John, your chart, and those just deal with the OMM cost, and number 15 again is OMM cost with the 16 is the discount rate, the valuation, how you got that, and the last question is basically where did the $10 million estimate come from? Is option 6, will that be fully paid for by option by $10 million? And then I think part of the conversation Mike and Bob had been having as to whether the $1 million that Ranson spent on, I'm assuming, this design thing, will be paid back within that $1 million. And so I'd appreciate if you could just provide me with those answers to those questions.
I guess it'd be okay. We'll get them back as soon as we can. Or Darrell, you could share them with the council members. Is that okay?
Absolutely.
If I could ask the one clarifying question. I mean, the councilman keeps referring to option 6, which was a hybrid of, well, let me rephrase this. The ultimate line that was selected was a hybrid of option 6. So I guess the question is, are questions regarding option 6 still really relevant when in fact that's not the option that you have on the table? That's not the $10.5 million option.
Correct. The design evolved, changes were made, routes were modified from the design report. So I would certainly be happy to, go through the engineering documents with anybody. I mean, I think I've reviewed them both with Councilman Brittingham and Councilman Traynor. But, if there are specific questions, absolutely, we can walk through those.
I just wanted to find out, are there 3 pumps, are we building 3 pump stations?
The Route 9 sewer project has 2 public pump stations. Rockwell has a pump station on their facility that basically takes the flows from their site, pumps it up to the entrance road, essentially. There's a portion of gravity that goes to the Orchard Public Pump Station, and then it travels down to the War Admiral Pump Station. So the project contains 2 public pump stations.
So it's closer to option 3. It's not option 5, but it's closer to option 3. And because I don't want
have
to...
option 3 in front of me.
I don't want
mean,
to drill down into the weeds on this one. I think just if you could provide the answer, explain that. I keep saying that we're using option 6, but then we're doing your air injection system at the War Admiral pump station, and then you're changing line sizes and designs from option 6. But if you look at option 6, which was page 64, it has 3 pump stations here, and one of them is east of the Rockwell facility. So I really want to get this right. Even on your plan right there, it doesn't show where the pump stations are. And since those are
Right,
large...
so you'd have to look at the actual construction documents, the approved documents that the State Health Department has approved to evaluate the final design. If you go back through the design report, there were varying iterations back in January of 2018. The final analysis was submitted to the State Health Department in June, I believe, of 2018, and that was the design document and the hydraulic analysis was something that was kept up to date for the most part, but the governing documents are the construction documents.
Right, but all I want to know is that, and you answered part of it, but I'd like it in writing. Option 6 that we keep referring to as what we're going to build has 3 pump stations. And then you're going to build a hybrid of option 6, and now you're saying it only has 2 pump stations. If you could kind of explain that in your writing. And then option 3 seemed to have been, and I think that's one of the questions, option 3 seemed to have been agreed by Chester to be the best, not the best, but option 3 worked. Option 3 was less expensive. Why option 3 is not what you're going and choosing, but you're choosing a more expensive option 6 hybrid with now 2 pump stations, where the plan says, map says 3. So I'd like some clarification on what you're actually building and how this option 3 and option 6, but that's written in. So,
Sure.
Thank you.
Can I ask just one last question to Hoy? Hoy, say we had never heard of the state financing package for this. Say Rockwell just came to town, put themselves up where they're at Jefferson Orchards, and they applied for a 5.5 rule for a $9 million approximately line with only 19,000, 20 whatever thousand gallons per day of sewer flow. Would the PSC approve that plan?
If there was no other connections and all those things, we're going through other political subdivisions, we have to assume that we own the whole sewer system. That would be one, if that's the only revenue that you're going to get off of that line, we would, and you went under 5.5, I think you would still do it, but it would require the developer, in this case Roxel, to put all the, again, you'd have to put all the money up front. You would build the line, and you would get whatever revenue comes out of them off of that line.
I know, but not your analysis. This analysis kind of insinuates that we need almost 1 million gallons per day to even come close to paying for this thing. If we didn't have any, I mean, we would kind of be financial ruin if we had to do it without all these gallons per day. So the PSC would allow us to do that?
Well, we wouldn't put ourselves in financial ruin. And I understand why you're asking the question, because these are the facts we're dealing with. But in a realistic situation, if I'm an industrial concern and I want to build a plant in your county and I'm not far from the public sewer, unless there's absolutely no place to discharge, I would build a package plant and I would do whatever pre-treatment I needed to do, and take care of your industrial discharges on the site so that all you were discharging into the receiving stream would be, regular sewage. And that would be the cheaper way to go. They would, and that happens all the time.
And I understand that. What I mean, though, is with the PSC, if they wanted to go 5.5, and it was going to be that much of a rate impact on our customers, would the PSC approve
Well,
it?
it wouldn't be a tax. In other words, if you had Roxel came in and said, we're out here where we are, we want sewer, and we'd have to say to them, we'll give you sewer, but it's going to cost you millions of dollars to get it. And if they put the money up front, then there is no risk to us, because the only thing you would pay back to them would be whatever their usage was under the 5.5 rule.
So how is this any different than it? I'm not following.
If all you're doing is if all you want to do is build the line to serve Roxel, I know that, and we all realize that Roxel's the elephant in the room. We get it. We all understand that. But I know the utility board has, and the utility staff has looked at this project, not with an emphasis on Roxel, but with an emphasis on how can we provide the infrastructure to serve the northern and western portion of what is now your utility system. And that's where the idea for expanding that project came. The real benefit, I think, to the utility system right now is getting service out to the Burr-Bardane intersection, the highway intersection. You go on beyond that to get to the Rockville site. But you're literally building if the plan is built as the utility board wants it, you're building a spine. And all these other developments in the exhibit you have to your question shows where they're located and on either side of it. Those developers are going to have to build either individually or collectively. They're going to have to build feeder lines, if you will, that will hook into those big lines. And they'll be doing that. We'll be asking them to do that under a 5.5 or an alternate 5.5 situation. But this gives us the opportunity to have the basic, it's like building it's like building a 4-lane highway. We have the 4-lane road, and then everything else will feed in afterward, and it was an ability to do it with no downside financial risk, at least that's the way we looked at it, no downside financial risk to ultimately the customer. And so if all you built was the line to Roxel, if that's all it was, but you knew that ultimately you needed to have this much bigger infrastructure out there, then the only other way to build the infrastructure, if you don't take advantage of either the state financing or if Roxel would agree to, pay for the whole thing, would be you'd have to come up with some design, either do it at the same time this line's being built or do it at some other time. You'd have to come up with a way to pay for this other however many millions of dollars it is.
And I appreciate that entire explanation, but
Yeah.
it doesn't answer my root question. If Rockwell, or an industrial user, or any user, wanted to use the 5.5 rule to connect to our system for a line this long and this expensive, would the PSC be inclined to approve that?
Yes. If the developer would come up and say, if the developer would put all the money up front.
And you said that would not cost us any money at that point.
That little piece doesn't, But what are you going to do with the other $5 or $6 million worth of infrastructure projects that you're not building? But that is relevant, isn't it, in the final analysis of this?
I mean, that can be a discussion for another day, but I'm just simply
Why is
talking
it?
about the Rockwell
But
line.
I respectfully take the opposite point, because we do have the Burr Bardane Park out there. We do have Jefferson High School. We do have these other projects.
I get that.
We do have the project that the district wanted to build and that the utility board thinks ought to be built, but in a much revised manner. Those things are out there, and they need to be built. Now, you can make an argument you don't need to build them today, but you need to build them in a relatively short period of time.
Hoyt, clarifying something else, though, under 5.5, unless it was a mainline extension agreement, if it was just Roxwell, why can't we say that tonight? Everybody's doing it. If it was just Rockwell and they were just building their line and they come in under 5.5 and they're out there and we don't have any extension to them, no service, they want to plop down money and do it, no impact to us, we don't need the PSC.
You don't need the PSC. That's what I said. You're right.
It's a combined utility that has a large enough customer base that would never require the PSC.
Yeah.
No.
Now, if they wanted to do a mainline extension agreement, we were to enter into an agreement, then yes, we would, where there would be some
Yeah.
impact to the ratepayer, potentially.
There would be no
Correct, there would be
You would
no
have
new
just-
customer
here,
connection.
in your question, you would have just the one customer.
You keep asking if they would approve it or not, and they wouldn't be involved.
Well, they
because
would
of
be
the
involved
size
if we
of
didn't want to build it, if we thought that it was going to raise our rates.
But it wouldn't raise your rate.
But it wouldn't.
But that's what this is arguing.
No,
that 5.5
what this is
raises our-
arguing, the argument is that what Mr. Kunkel's presented, and I think this goes back to what you made an original presentation in October, I think, or September. The original thing, we compared building the project as designed under the state financing. Number two, building the project as designed under a 5.5 analysis. In other words, you would assume that the developer would put all the money up front. And so therefore, the developer would be entitled to a refund from everyone that eventually connects into it. And that's the one that shows you need the rate increase because, assuming whatever rate of growth you want to assume, there are going to be several years when you're going to be paying substantial amounts of money to the developer. Now, it goes away, or, as you all know, after it bleeds out, it's gone. But that's why. If we were comparing building the big project with state financing to building under 5.5 only a project that benefits Roxwell. If you do that, there'll be, Roxwell puts all the money up. You're going to pay some of it back under John's analysis. Originally, you got to put $300,000 or $400,000 up for what they're going to initially generate.
So, then, I guess let me just make it clear then. I'll ask you. Under 5.5, if Rockwell decides to build a line to only service themselves, they apply for the 5.5 as they've done. We're currently in that situation. And they build that. There is no impact on ratepayers.
Yes, that's correct.
That is very different.
However,
hang on.
we have to go back out there and build
Right,
a
we
sewer
would-
line
Mike,
right
you're
next to that line.
That hasn't
We
been the
do- no,
question.
we
You're
have to
conflating
do
two
it.
different
But
arguments.
you're not.
That's gonna
looking at
cost
the
us double of what we
complexity of
just
the
did.
Situation, you're trying to skirt it down to a very narrow thing, and
No,
we're
I'm-
not in that position anymore. We're operating the sewer system.
I'm
public sewer
reiterating what
system
we've
of the
asked
county.
many, many times, and we've been consistently told, and I absolutely, before the next city council meeting, will write down the transcripts of those meetings where we've been consistently told that if we go 5.5, it's an impact to ratepayers.
Right,
Okay,
right.
hold on.
If
Can I
we
say
build
something?
that line,
If we build that line.
If we build that line.
Correct.
Now, if you read, I put 16 questions out here, and they go directly to the question of, should we build that line? that type of line, where we're putting it, with 3 or 2 pump stations, and where those EDUs are, when they were requested, how long they have been out there, and are those viable developments? Those are the questions that we need answers to so that we can make some reasonable decisions. We're assuming that everyone is going to put all kinds of development out there, and then the question is, what type of development are they putting out there? And are they putting industrial plants out there? If you start from Ranson and you go right at the stoplight in Ranson where the Home Depot is, and you go 3.9 miles, you reach the Rockville facility along the road. So basically, we're going to be putting in a 3.9-mile pipe. Well, what are we putting in there? Because if you back out of Martinsburg and you go 3.9 miles from, say, the Target, you pass by a sewer plant, you pass by a strip joint, you pass by a cement factory, you pass by a jail, you pass by all kinds of stuff. So there is a question of what is going to go in that 3.9 miles of area there. And we do have a responsibility to look at that. We are, it's in the county, but fate has given us the responsibility of looking to see what will be what will Jefferson County look like? Is it going to be more Martinsburg or Berkeley County, or is it going to be more of Jefferson County? Is it going to be Berkeley County coming west or east, or is it going to be Jefferson County going west? And so I would appreciate if we could see the answers to this chart so that we could get a sense of whether this is a realistic development package, because you asked, your numbers come up to almost 1 million gallons, and you said the developers were talking, their plans were even to do more, and they were unrealistic.
Yeah, you're right. I think one of the arguments they made, I'm trying to get the number, they argued that at build-out, what they wanted to do would require 1,041,000 gallons a day. And the pump station that's being proposed was something short of that. It was in the neighborhood of 920 or 30,000 gallons a day. And our response back to them was, those extra 100,000 gallons can be easily handled by an expansion of the pump system in 15 years from now, when you actually get to that end point. You don't need to, when you're building water or sewer, there's always a trade-off. You don't want to get too much infrastructure ahead of the growth, because then you're paying for something that's sitting idle, and I think that's one of your issues. On the other hand, if you build it too slow, it creates the opposite effect. You're always playing catch-up, and you're letting the developers lead you around by the nose.
And let's
as opposed
not
to doing
forget
your
that
plan.
we've been there.
Yeah.
In a big way, and it's part of why our system got it's the reason that we have 3 members of this council and over 700 some odd residents, probably it's more than that, I'm getting it wrong, have been served by the PSD sewage system. We're trying to solve those problems. That's the idea here. I think your questions are completely fair. I think it's great if we get a better justification of why it's important that we do this and where it fits into. They have a wastewater treatment strategic plan that goes out 20 years or more. This isn't outside of that plan. This isn't,
Right.
beyond. Fellas, I lived through the Chesapeake Bay compliance years. Those were really, really not fun years talking about sewage systems here in Charlestown and in the greater county, because let's face it, even though we've had the PSD, we've been treating the sewage all of these years. So I think it's great that we're trying to look at other problems we can solve with this. I think that's important. Those conversations are important, and I think we want to look broadly at them. I think your questions are fair. I think it would be great to get something that gives, you've mentioned many times the broader view and how we looked at this and why.
Yes, there was extensive.
Ransom was only looking at this, and it's not because we're trying to appease the developers who aren't appeased anyway because they fought us on the previous line. So it's, you know,
Yeah,
all of
happy
these
to
issues are
provide the
fair.
justification for the design. That's not an issue.
But, you know, one of the reasons, and I do remember back, this utility board, you came up before us and gave us documents that said that the part of what the PSD was using was that they had EDU units that were on the books for decades. And your argument to us was that the PSD was sitting on these units that are probably never going to be developed, and after the 2008 economic crash, it was probably unrealistic, but they were staying on the PSD's books, and the PSD could show themselves in a better light. Well, I'm saying, please, on this chart, tell me when that EDU was requested, tell me if there's any EDUs have been used on that site, and tell me what's going on that site. I mean, many of these things sound like housing developments, but I don't know. And therefore, tell me, you know, Chester spent $1 million doing this, I assume. Somehow did not anyone from the West Virginia Infrastructure Board tell them, well, these areas here are going to be a part of the industrial plans that we have, and where are those 1,000 acres? And I think the people of Jefferson County and Charlestown would like to know, you know, what is this 1,000-acre industrial area that Chester's in twice in this thing said that it's putting in? Where are those other 610 acres? And what's going on them?
So are we likely to be ready to talk about this at the next council meeting, which is next Tuesday night? Or, because we only have this one and then the meeting on the 4th.
I think we can
So-
address most of these questions. It's all information that is contained in our projections and our
Okay.
historical evaluations, so yes.
All right, so we'll plan on having this portion then on the agenda, and Mike, you may be coming back with some other
You all meet next
documents.
Monday or next Tuesday?
It'll be next
Tuesday.
Tuesday night.
Tuesday.
Holiday.
So in light of this current new iteration of 5.5, let me ask you, John, where do we come up with the $9.5 million deposit by Rockwool? How are we coming up with that?
Okay, the total project was estimated to be $10 million. The Charlestown Utility Board share, in round numbers, was estimated to be $500,000. And what that represents is 5 times Rockwool's annual use.
But so this $9.5 million, is it assuming under this 5.5 that Rockwool will agree to the project that we have designed?
Exactly.
Yes.
Oh, do we know that?
No.
The only thing they've requested of us is a 5.5. I think somebody shared with others.
Only to serve their site.
Okay.
And utility board is in the process of dealing with the engineer to make a response to that.
Okay. So to build on what you were saying, the question is whether we do, if the question is whether we just build something for Rockwool that doesn't cost the state payers or the ratepayers any money, or if we build this whole thing out, and if we want it not to, which to me makes sense, especially if there's no funding risk to the ratepayers. I just want to throw that out there just for food for thought for.
If I could add to that.
There's a perplexed look. I'm saying that if we use the state funding and we get this, whether or not we use the capacity within 10 or 20 years or whatever, obviously it will service the Burr Industrial Park, it will help in this Flowing Spring situation, all that kind of stuff. So if we're looking at, if the question is a risk to the ratepayers, and if we get the bare bones to Rockwool, and that's it, or we can do this other thing that sets us up for future development or whatever, then the way to go would be the state funding, I think.
The other thing too,
Sorry to interrupt, I just,
I just wanted to add that the revenues, the new
The other thing too, I'm under the assumption that, Mr. Brahan, where'd he go? Anyway, Mr. Brahan brought up the point about, okay, if Rockwell, we just do the line just dedicated to them, we wouldn't do that. We can't do that. For our future growth, we just simply can't. Let me look at Mike, right? So we simply could not do that. It would be so disadvantageous to us that we simply would not do that.
Yeah, we'd be accused of a few things and shooting ourselves in the foot.
Right. So when Mike gets back, we're going to make sure he understands we cannot just do that.
I think the other thing too is if you just do that, let's say you just do that, there are going to be rate increases because of these other projects that we're going to have to do in the near future.
Right.
And we're not going to do this and then 5-10 years later dig another trench and put another pipe right on top of the one we just put on. We're just not going to do
We
that.
just did that on Jefferson Avenue.
Yes, I know, that's the problem, we gotta
But
stop doing
there's,
that.
there is also, guys, there's option 1, there's option 2, there's option 3, there's option 4, and there's option 5. We're not just talking about a pipe that would serve Rockwool. There are various options, and I'm assuming that you're going to come back and explain to us.
but
what
that's
those
only what I was
options
saying
are.
Well, I
about
think
Mr.
most of those
Brahan.
options are
Yeah.
just for Rockwell. They're just different
Right.
options just for Rockwell for the
Well, there was a year and a half of extensive evaluation of all of these options with the state, with Branson, with Charlestown. There is absolutely a reason that we ended up with the design that we have today. The justification is there based on growth projections, the school board facility, various parcels within the development, within the business park. So happy to provide that justification, but again, there was extensive evaluations that got us to the design that we have approved.
And again, I think we've traveled down so many different roads with this particular project, but ordinarily, council wouldn't get so heavily involved in the justification of an engineering. We would assume that the utility board did that analysis and chose an option for various reasons. We are where we are, so I think they need to share with us those reasons, and you're prepared to do that, and
I just wanted
it's
to
great.
add also that I know the utility board's no longer subject to the jurisdiction of the PSC, but as far as constructing projects, the PSC philosophy has always been you construct projects to serve active existing customers. With these projections, we're serving future customers, so to do it in a fashion different than risk-free state financing, the risks would go up astronomically because you couldn't be certain it will achieve that customer growth.
Okay, thank
Does
you.
going to 5.5 in effect make us partners with Rockwell in building? So we doing that in partnership?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, are there any more questions, or can we move on to the next topic? Mr. Zaglifa, Councilman Brittingham is back. Did you want to make a point to him before we move on to the next?
Rewind the tape, and why you bailed on me, I'm not sure. But anyway.
The little boys room.
Got it. So you brought up the whole dedicated line just to Rockwell and so on, and we made the point that we would never do that. We can't do that. It would have to encompass some of the projects that we are dealing with. So even if they came in and said, we just want this line, we wouldn't say, okay, that's it. No rate to the, risk to the ratepayer. Now granted, all of this is based on Plan A of that project. But the dedicated line, we would not simply do that because we would have to go back 5 years later and we would have to address Flowing Springs, Burr. We would still have to address that. That's not going to go away. that will have, you know what I'm saying? And we're not going to build the line and then 5 years later put another line on top of that.
I understand that. But
Did on Jefferson Avenue, just
But
last?
the PSC rules are pretty explicitly clear that when you do these cost analysis for a new extension, you can only calculate in customers that are actually hooking up when it's constructed. They don't allow you to look into the future and make these assumptions because typically these assumptions don't pan out. There's absolutely, and we all know it, no way that 1 million gallons a day is coming on this line in 25 years. Will some of that be built? Absolutely, I'm sure. Some of it, will come to fruition, a certain portion of it, but certainly not 1 million gallons, and that's why they don't let you make those assumptions. And so that's my point, is that in all reality, we can bleed over this 5.5 analysis and state financing analysis all day long, but there are some pretty extreme assumptions baked into there that more than likely we won't see half of them. A lot of those same projects have been used as an assumption on other funding that's been granted, and yet the improvements were never done for them. So that's all my point on that one.
And my point is that the state financing is zero risk.
It's
5
not zero risk.
It is zero risk. For ratepayers, it is zero risk.
I can tell you that I sat there this morning and I listened to the building commission meeting from August 6th, where John Stump says that the purpose of going through the building commission is to insulate the city from any risk.
Correct.
So if there's no risk, there's
I
no
said zero risk to ratepayers, not to the city.
Right, but I also, I don't want us to leave this place thinking, once again, that the only options that we are being given is one small pipe that runs from Rockville into the Ranson feeder system, or anybody that's ever watched that movie Contact knows of the Hayden's or Hatton's law, the first law of government spending, which is why build one when you can build two at twice the price. If you look at option 6, and again, all I ask is that you look at option 6, and then you look at option 5, and then you read, this thing says that we can pretty much go with option 3, which reduces the cost. And so,
How does it impact the funding mechanism? All those options that they're probably viable options. I'm not saying they're not, but how does it impact what we're faced with? Either a straight line of Rockwell, no rate increase, or state funding, whatever option you go, no rate increase. 5.5, one of those options, or with the current plan, rate increase. I mean, those are the choices that we have, right?
yeah, but here's my problem, that, and it's why the little chart is there. If I'm having a hard time trying to figure out why, if Rockwell, if we allow other developers to use the 5.5 process, is that not going to come back on us with having to raise rates for those developers? Because we have been told that there is going to be a 42-cent per 1,000 gallon increase if we do Rockwell with 5.5.
Under the current plan.
Under the current plan. So you have to throw in then, Bob, what's the current plan? Is it option 6, which is Hatton's rule of government, first rule of government spending, or is it option 3, which is a much smaller line that accommodates everything and the growth, and is a cheaper line that Rockwell would be contributing to? And then what is the development along that 3.9 going to look
I
like?
think we're circling around this too many times, and we're not going to get an answer until we get the presentation of the justification of why they want one option over another. Otherwise, we're still kind of just going over the same territory. So if there's nothing new, then I think we should go ahead and move on to our next agenda item.
Agreed.
Or have we kind of covered it all under just the one, practically? I left my agenda over there. Michael.
I think it's right there.
I'm sorry, y'all, I kind of jumped into chairing this meeting. The mayor has an ill child at home and needed to head out of here, so that's why I'm up here now. Oh, thank you. Not that I'm going to use that. Are we on 3200, request for sanitary sewer service and flow reconciliation? I think that we kind of already covered that because we talked about the revised letter.
Well, I was going to say, yeah, just a little bit then. So what you have in your packet is you do have a revised letter. I think as Kristen had indicated in the earlier meeting, that what they had submitted to us was not consistent with some of the earlier projections on industrial flow. So that document is in there with a little bit of email explaining why the number is still different than what we see in our NPDES permit. I have added, and it's on your table, the most recent correspondence that was sent by Jane Arnett to the Rockwool attorneys regarding the limitation on the industrial flow. So if maybe you want to just talk a little bit about where we are with that, that would probably help.
Sure, certainly. We did want to issue a response to Rockwool regarding their letter of correction with regard to the flows. There have been no other changes. Again, we're still, our NPDES permit is consistent with this request and the phasing as we understand the project, a maximum of 14,900 gallons per day of industrial flows. So I don't really have any other updates. Certainly happy to answer questions.
Domestic, I think. 14,000 is your domestic.
No, I'm sorry, 14,900, of industrial wastewater. Yeah, 14,000 is the domestic, for the full build-out. 14,900 is what is in the NPDES permit for the industrial user.
Okay, I was reading this letter here from your 5.5. So I guess, and again, I got to be educated here because I have a couple of questions, and they're not meant to be an attack. It's just, I really just want to know.
Sure.
So we asked, when we got this letter, we asked, let me find it, I believe it was Susan Riggs, right? She gave us this letter, and we said, hey, listen, and I'm paraphrasing it because I can't find where it was. We said, hey, with this new letter, does that reset the 45-day clock?
Right, it's our understanding that it would not, it was just a clarification letter, so it does not reset the 45 days that we are required to provide the cost estimate.
That's a minor thing, but we would dictate that, right? I mean, the reason was because Rockwool really wants to get this done.
I read it
I
as
think
like,
you'd go back to the
I read it,
original-
she said that she would like to have it done. It wasn't like
It's
saying
true.
we had to have it done. It's like they would like to have it done is how it.
Agreed.
I understand.
When's
But
that
they
correct?
changed
Right,
the
right,
numbers.
right, but they changed the,
And it's just a few days, I get it. I'm not really,
It's 12 days. I mean,
I'm not wrapped around that as much as I'm wrapped around, that's our decision. And it's not whether or not,
sure.
because we want to make sure that we have all the information, right? We know where all this is coming from, and it's not necessarily because they want to get this thing done.
I would agree.
What was
I
in
would
the
agree.
email. So that kind of,
I think if we get into an issue where Hatchchester, for instance, will be talking at the board meeting tomorrow, initiating the task order to get them to prepare the cost estimate, if they got into a situation where they absolutely couldn't provide that within the 45-day period, then I think we'd be able to work through that.
I guess, to reiterate, you guys are the utility. So we accommodate our customers, but we're the utility.
Absolutely.
So with that in mind, I wonder, the information, and I go back to the meeting that we had a few months ago, which was a great meeting, don't get me wrong, and I loved it with the representative from Rockwool, but there was some discrepancies in the numbers in the domestic flow, right?
Right, which they clarified.
They figured it out, but they figured it out, not because the utility said, this doesn't make sense. It's because couple of people on the city council said, this doesn't make sense. So what I'm trying to say very delicately here is, I need to be assured, and I think that most of us here are thinking we need to be assured that the utility is doing their due diligence to make sure what any customer is telling us who needs service is, hey, that's, okay, I was going to say that passes a smell test, but probably not appropriate in this particular context. Yeah, that makes sense, or wait a minute,
Yes,
these
yes.
numbers aren't jiving with me. And I kind of want to feel like, hey, look, we're doing our due diligence here. We're not just saying, taking their word for this is what we're going to do, so we're going to do, wait a minute. Are we doing that?
Yes, I believe that we are absolutely looking into and requiring everything necessary to assure that there are not going to be any impacts to our facilities, to the sewer lines.
That their numbers make sense.
Yes, I think we are very, very
all over the
comfortable.
place.
And at the end of the day, the permit will tell that story, because you see in Jane's response letter that it says, these are what the permit numbers, if you cannot exceed these numbers, if you do, there will be these consequences. That, I think, is the crux of Jane's response is, this is the number that's on the permit, and that's it.
Yes, we have the necessary, requirements in the sewer user agreement to hold them accountable if they're exceeding anything within the NPDES permit.
What is the number on the permit?
14,900 gallons per day.
Industrial waste?
Yes.
Okay, so that's not the other waste, the domestic.
However, we have required them to install meters on both the domestic discharge line and the industrial line, so we will be able to determine exactly what's going through those meters and into our system.
Is there a permit that, or it's some kind of documentation that says, listen, for the domestic waste side, you cannot exceed this flow rate? If that's the case, what is that flow?
Well, we would basically utilize the volumes that they have provided to us, which is 14,000 gallons per day at maximum build-out. There is capacity within the line, so if we get to an issue where, they're exceeding that, as long as the line has capacity for their domestic flows, and that we're not creating an issue with other users, we'll be monitoring that.
Okay, I guess where I'm going to is really covered in 3206, so I don't really want to jump the gun at this point.
Okay, well then, we'll move on unless anyone else has a question on this topic. Mr. Tolbert.
Okay, well, only one, when I sat down tonight, there was a letter here, I guess everyone received a copy from Mr. Tabb, who states that, and maybe
I
you
think
might
it's
want to...
just you. Did anyone else get a letter?
It was an old letter from a couple weeks ago, I think.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a...
I've got copies in your box.
Yes, that's
I'd like to
true.
go.
It was in the
Okay.
box. But he states that Rockwool is in an SID-listed facility, Special Industrial District, requiring industrial waste discharge. Does CTUB, he says CTUB does not have an industrial waste permit. If you could kind of explain that, and then I thought of something else. Right now, and I don't know if they're in Burr, but there are several, the PSD, I believe, had several industrial customers that,
Yes,
with
sir.
package plants, that they were treating the industrial waste at the package plant?
Not package plants, no, their facilities are considered industrial users.
Okay, but those industrial users were treating their waste before they then put it into our pipe?
No.
No.
No, they're just discharges, basically what Rockwool will be as an industrial user. Their flows are considered, based on DEP requirements, an industrial user. So they flow into the sanitary just like Rockwell will.
And then, are there any package plants that are in that area or that Burr uses? I know they wanted to give us one.
It was an old decommissioned.
Right, that was decommissioned, right.
but
There
are
are no
there-
other package plants in that area.
So we won't be, once we provide this, if we were to go with the $10 million big pipe option and we sewer up all of Burr, we're not going to be inheriting any existing industrial users or
Well, the industrial users that the PSD had have been transferred to our permit. So we, prior to the PSD acquisition, we had one industrial user, which was our water treatment plant. Now we've got the 5 industrial users from the PSD. Those flows will go into this Route 9 sewer project if we proceed as designed.
Okay. Now, are they part of
They are part of the projected connections, but they will not be new connections, so they will not contribute to the
Right.
repayment.
The existing.
That's,
Yes.
I was also going, but the question did, special industrial district.
Without seeing the letter, I'm sorry, I'm happy to look at it and evaluate it. That term doesn't
But if
ring a bell with me, so I'm not quite sure where
Joe,
that information's being
we
pulled
can get
from.
your copy, but could you
Okay.
tack that on to the answers
Can we
to the
include that in
questions?
the list of questions that Councilman Tolbert submitted? So I think we got to get back to the agenda here. Is there anything else on those letters with regard to the flow
Yes.
reconciliation?
So initially, Rockwell had asked for $14,900. We did a modification to our DEP permit, and at the time, there were questions in regards to how much total they would use. And at the time, there were people using the term phased permitting. And we were told, no, this is not phased permitting. That's not what's taking place here. However, we're kind of in the final days. We're kind of sitting here waiting on the DEP's approval or disapproval. And the customer just informed us that they're, in essence, doubling their industrial waste. The other question was, why are we doing, this allows them to do a minor modification, not a major modification, because the threshold was 25,000 gallons per day. Now we're over that. Now the customer is writing us an email saying that they expect to have 32,800 gallons per day industrial sewage. Why would we not pull back our DEP permit? If the customer is telling us that this is how much we plan to put into the sewer system, why would we not say to the DEP, hey, the information's changed, customer says it's now doubled, and pull it back?
Well,
I
that's,
think this is for the line.
that is for the total design for,
Phases are done.
yes. Yeah, we would, but the
Agreed.
phasing, the schedule of their construction, to my knowledge, has not changed, has not deviated from our understanding and what we submitted the NPDES permit for. So again, I think the threshold would be if it's several years out, DEP would not even consider modifying or including those flows within the permit because it's unknown. But in my opinion, nothing has changed with their schedule. Their request is what they would want the line to be designed for, just very similar to, this being able to, the design to account for 900,000 gallons per day. That's the ultimate design. We wouldn't phase the design, if that,
Yeah, I looked at that too,
Sense.
and I guess that phase 2, which doubles, that's not even in their plans.
not even, yeah.
But if they're going to say, look, we're going to do the way I looked at it, they're going to do a 5-5, and so they're saying, hey, look, this is going to be the full capacity. I think that's kind of the way I read it.
Exactly, they're kind of arguing for it on both sides. They want us to design a line for them at the size that they eventually need, but they don't want us to do any of the permitting. at the
They will
size
have
that
to do a permit.
Yeah, they will
Yeah,
have to do
A
it.
major modification when they get the second phase up.
Right.
Have to do another minor modification.
No, they'd have to do a major modification.
They could,
They'd have to
right,
do a
again,
major modification. That's the law.
when you get
Mike,
to,
that is the
when you
law,
get to
sorry.
25,000 gallons per day, that is the threshold of
What if they
it
say they're
changing to a major.
They're not. If you remember, it was valid question, and it was asked by someone, and I think you got a response from our environmental lawyer. When the total industrial discharge from that facility hits the 25,000 gallon per day level, they need a major we need a major modification to our permit. So, you know, this first phase is the 14,000 plus. If and when they want to expand that plant, they have to, you know, it triggers a major modification to the city's discharge.
So which, if public hearing is the only difference, I didn't get a warm
Right.
fuzzy on that either.
It would be following the same process, the same evaluation of their flows and what is in the effluent from their facility.
Hopefully they would get a different transcripting company.
Right. The only other thing I would add to this group, or to this agenda item, is there was this outstanding question of what was happening with their flows down at the Mississippi plant. I have reached back out to Rockwell and asked if they would like to add anything else for the record to clarify that. So I haven't received any information back on the flows there. So if we do get something, I'll certainly be sharing it with the
To
members.
be honest, I was kind of going to talk about that on agenda item number 4, so.
There we go.
Okay.
Well, wait a minute.
Well, sounds good. Then let's,
Got one more.
one more, okay.
And then just a quick, page 40 for a package is since we were talking about the second facility, it's a letter, something from Rockwell that describes what's that, rock fun production, which I guess is their ceiling tiles, which I guess is their Phase 2 plant.
It's actually
No, it's a Phase
1B.
1B.
That's part of Phase 1.
Which is.
1B.
Right, but that is not included within our NPDES permit. So at the point at which they're within 30 days of moving forward with that, we would be submitting a revised or another minor modification to our permit to include those flows.
For this rock fun production.
Correct.
And so is it part of the 19,500 for Phase 1? Or is it, just using your chart?
14,900? No, it is not.
So that's part of Phase 2.
No, it's Phase
It's
1B.
Phase 1B.
Phase
It's a future, let's just say it's a future phase.
Okay,
Phase 1, Phase 1B.
okay.
It's actually, we came up with those, by the way. I think that one there, that, from my understanding, based on a meeting that we had with them at the utility plant there, was that that was in their planning stage. But they had not done the permitting or anything like that. Whereas Phase 2 is not even in their, like a date. We're going to do this in 2025 or whatever the case is, or 25, maybe even better. But they hadn't figured that out yet, so that's why that was a Phase 2. And then the Phase 1B. It caused a lot of confusion back a few months ago whenever we were talking about Phase 1 and Phase 2.
I think my confusion, and part of it's exactly what that was, Bob, but then it was also the last paragraph that basically says the cleaning of the paints process, where last sentence, the paint solids will be appropriately managed, well, before that, wash water generated from periodic cleanings will be collected for on-site treatment via separation methods. Roxwell will use dewatering flocculants, thank you, and a filter press to separate paint solids from the water used for cleaning. The paint solids will be appropriately managed as waste, and the treated water will be shipped off-site under the appropriate waste category or discharged if desired and adequate permits are obtained. I guess, do we know about that?
No, we don't. Again, this is a future phase that would be evaluated under another modification to our permit. So we certainly don't even have, other than this brief explanation of what they would intend to do, we don't have enough information. It's down the road, and that will be evaluated under another permit.
Okay, thank you.
All right, are we ready to move on? All right, agenda item 3, I think we have fully covered, but I'm going to call it again. 3201, the state financing package. Obviously, we went over the spreadsheet and things earlier. Anything specific on this topic for Mr. Kunkel, Kristen Hoy, anyone else in the room?
So it's my understanding, just in talking with Daryl, that there was a question that came up about the ability of the development office to fund 100% of the project. I think that came out of maybe a FOIA document. And so I do have, obviously, confirmation from the development office in writing, happy to provide this, that there was I think there was a misinterpretation of that 50% threshold that really only applies to grant funding. So this is a loan that will be 100% funded by the West Virginia Development Office. A very similar example is the P&G facility in Berkeley County. So again, happy to expand on that if needed, but I think that was the big question.
I have some follow-up questions for that. So I actually also saw the grant stuff and the 50%, and you're correct, that is for a grant, which kind of leads to a couple questions. I'm looking at the initial application that Ranson made to the IJDC for the project. With the IJDC process, you need a person that applies, a city or even it can be a company, a for-profit. You need a sponsor, which has to be an economic development authority, which is the JCDA. Ranson applied for this application, not Charlestown, correct?
Correct. Right.
Has Charlestown ever applied for this funding?
No, it essentially was transferred with the acquisition of the City of Ranson sewer system.
And when Ranson applied for this, I mean, they had to provide, basically you're applying to a bank for a loan. And so they had to submit 3 years of audited financials. They had to say what they were using the money on, how much they were going to use it for, and all those things, correct?
Sure.
But Charlestown has never actually applied or submitted any of that to the bank.
That's correct.
On the third page of that, and this is where this question comes up, it says funding per project. These are the instructions from, it's the instructions from the IJDC packet. It says maximum amount of total eligible maximum loan. For a private entity, they'll fund up to 70%. For a public entity, they'll only fund up to 90%. It says it right on the third page of their document. It also says a maximum loan of $3 million. And so how did we get a 100% loan in the amount of $10.5 million?
Well, that's being funded through the West Virginia Development Office, not the Infrastructure and Jobs Development Council.
Let me
Sure.
try to respond to that. The IJDC, we have to go back to when Bob Wise was governor. What, 2000? He was elected.
Oh, my goodness.
2000. And we passed an infrastructure amendment to the Constitution, and we borrowed $400 million, issued $400 million worth of bonds. 80% of that goes into strictly water and sewer projects. 20% of that goes into what is defined under the statute as they define water and sewer projects as a project. They define infrastructure projects to include not only water and sewer, but roads, anything else, and that money is controlled by the West Virginia Economic Development Authority. And they do use the same application that you just were referring to, but I don't know if it's routinely, but I'm aware of one recent instance where they do put 100% of a project cost, they will advance the money in the form of a loan. They did it in Berkeley County 2.5 years ago, and I was the attorney for the entity. And it happened to be a utility project, but it was a loan from them, and it had some unique features to it which made it very advantageous to borrow the money. It was not nearly as sweet as the deal here, but they have the ability to move those things around. So they do, and I'm also aware, although I haven't done one myself, at least not recently, I'm aware of other projects, economic development-like projects, where they will fund 100% of whatever the project is defined as.
I get that.
Now, you're right,
But
Mike.
on
I
the
don't
third
think-
page of this application, it says 90% at $3 million.
But we have a loan commitment for 100% of this project. We have we have the letter. And, now, I think you're right. I don't think if it's a private company that's going to be the borrower, I don't think they do 100%. I think you're probably right about that, but I do think it's just an internal policy. But I know that they do these economic development projects, that's where this money's coming from.
I get it.
This money's coming from that.
So when this transferred to, and that piece is weird to me, because I can't go to a bank and ask for a loan and submit to them all my financial information and then say, oh, well, now my neighbor's going to take the loan without them wanting any information from him. So that part is strange to me, but the sponsoring agency is the Jefferson County Development Authority, which currently is defunct in its current status. Did we get permission from them to do this? I mean, they're the sponsoring agency.
No, I don't know that we got the permission, but when we started talking about the State Development Authority knew that we were acquiring the Ranson assets. They have never voiced any issue, and we've gone right along with the project, and they issued a loan commitment letter, and they've been communicating with us and the attorneys. We've been negotiating the terms of the documents.
So does this type of loan require a sponsoring agency?
Well, the sponsoring agency, in this case, we stepped into Ranson's shoes when we acquired Ranson's assets. So this is an asset that came along with the project, with everything else. And so we are the sponsoring agency, I believe.
So JCDA is out of the picture on this completely?
On this one, it is.
The reason I'm asking...
And let me back up. The reason, when they began this process last fall, there were three components of this project. There was the water, there was the sewer, and there was a road. And I'm not too familiar with what the road project is. It's not a big component, but it's a component. And they did. I'm told, I think Kristen may have told to me, or maybe it was Jane, that they did. How the applicant was between Ranson and the PSD on how to make one application for all of this project. And I can't share any more details because I don't know any more about that. But we've provided them all the information they've ever asked for, and they're working with us to close the loan.
So my concern with that, and the reason I have that question is I would hate for some T not to be crossed or some I to be dotted. And let's say we go with the state funding bond and everything's cool and we're sitting here fat, dumb, and happy. 3 years later,
somebody tries to...
auditor comes back and says, oh, wait a minute, this wasn't done correctly and you now owe us X number of dollars. So that's kind of where I'm coming from.
Okay. And I'll tell you what, I'm going to raise that with John, who has done most of the talking with them on the loan details, the bond details, and make sure that we're okay on that.
Do we have an update on when we're getting the agreement? And I heard you mention earlier we've kind of renegotiated 25 years. Is that beneficially approved?
What their normal course is,
and
I think they want to stick to that. Assuming, and let's assume that the council approves this financing and that the building commission also approves it. Once the DEP permit is issued, if it is issued, I believe that will be all the items that will be needed to allow this project to be built. Now, there may be others. There's some litigation pending in the Circuit Court of Jefferson County. There's at least one, if not two cases. I'm not sure how many cases there are. The lender may very well say, until those matters are resolved, we're not going to close on the loan. That's completely up to the lender. But once they issue a notice to proceed or a notice to bid, they authorize Charlestown to bid it. The utility board will, in due course, advertise it and put it out to bid. Once those bids are received and analyzed, we get ready to actually close the loan, and that's when they generate the loan documents. That's the way they've done it for, if we've been involved in any project over the years here with Charlestown, That's exactly the way they do every deal they do.
Right, but typically there'll be a draft document or something that guarantees
Yeah,
the
we can
25
we
in
can get
advance of
yeah, we
that.
can get a draft document. Obviously, the key language is the language that's contained in the lease.
Right. And
Yeah, you're familiar with that. I think
We've
it's
been given
section,
that, yes.
paragraph 4.05.
Right.
Which defines what the repayment comes from, where the funds, how they're generated and how they're defined.
And has the state given us confirmation that they've approved that lease agreement?
Yes.
When did they do that?
I don't have any written confirmation. What I have is we've negotiated this language, and it's in the lease document. They've approved the leases to form. It's been, Mike, it's been a month and a half ago, perhaps longer.
Wasn't the term 40 years in that lease document?
Right, so
Well,
that.
but yeah, and
right,
then.
I was
we
just saying, so
reduced-
that
we
needs to be,
reduced it, and now, and then if you remember, you asked us if we could lengthen it, and we did get it extended to 25 years.
Well, that hasn't been, we don't have a final commitment letter on
Yeah.
that, but my discussion with the development office is basically assuming that the state funding is approved, the language would go back to them from council with the 25 years, and that would be solidified in the lease agreement very quickly.
Right,
Well,
so the other document you're referencing is the form of the loan agreement, and again, we've been trying to get, John Stump has been talking about this, but Kristen, and I think you were referencing this, Hoy, there are regular calls between the state and the city at this point where this issue has been brought up multiple times. Again, they're stating essentially, we'll deliver it at the time that it's, basically you've either agreed to the loan, conditioned upon this understanding, and you've gone out to bid and you're ready to close the deal. That's when they think the form of the loan agreement will be available for the city to review. Because until we get to that point, we haven't closed on a loan.
You would not, until you act, we all understand and they understand, this council was not given its final say-so, assuming it goes forward with this type of financing, until it sees those documents.
okay.
I did.
And we will continue to endeavor to get it up here.
Okay, but
I don't want to put words in their mouth, but I think they're falling back on the process, well, this is the way we do it. And so we'll see if we can't shake that loose from the tree.
Okay, but they certainly can give us a revised lease agreement that includes the 25 years, because we have that in draft form. That's just changing the 40 to a 25, right? We certainly can get that, and we certainly can get a revised letter, like they've sent before, that committed to the 30 years down to the 25, if not the formal agreement. And we can always make any motion we might make contingent upon acceptable receipt and review of those documents, certainly. So, but I think at a minimum, correct me if I'm wrong, someone jump out, but I think we need those at a minimum. I mean,
Well, certainly, I mean, it
so,
seems to make sense to get in writing what the state, how they estimate net revenues. Because certainly a bank is not just going to let you set your own terms and say, hey, this is how much we...
Terms are in the lease agreement.
they're in the lease
Agreement
They will
between
be
us
in
and the
loan
building
agreement.
commission.
Those are
Right.
those repayment terms, and you're right, there was a lot of,
We wrote the lease agreement. It's between us and the building commission. The state doesn't have to sign it. You said they have nothing in writing to say that they're okay with that.
but the loan from the state to the building commission is predicated on having a lease which guarantees the flow of funds to pay the lease back. It's the same thing with if this were a private transaction, the bank was loaning the money to a shopping center developer. They want to see the prime leases executed before they actually close on the loan, so that they
No, and I get that. I guess my concern is we're still putting the cart before the horse. I mean, we were supposed to make our final vote on this in August, and in October, the state was still looking for this lease agreement and for what the repayment terms were going to be. And
Well, we
they
went
were
back,
asking how much they were getting paid per 1,000 gallons at the time.
It was about a month ago when you asked if we could get the term changed, and I think you're the one that made the request. And so, we've been trying to work on it to get it as current as we can.
So just to clarify the final vote thing, right? So let's say that we have the final vote, and let's say the vote is to adopt the state financing package. And then let's say the building commission, assuming the building commission goes along with that. Is there another vote somewhere that actually executes the loan from our point? Or is it done, is the city council's role for that funding, if we vote for that, is the city's council role?
You will have to approve what's called a supplemental resolution.
Right.
And you do that in all
You
your other
always have to
funding.
do that with
And
any
it-
bond
In
funding.
other words, this resolution you're being asked to prepare is pretty broad-based, but the supplemental resolution has the particulars in it. And it will have in it the particulars about this repayment issue.
Okay, that's what I
And
wanted.
that will have to be approved at a separate council meeting. And that is the last thing. And also during that, I believe that resolution authorizes the mayor and other individuals on behalf of the city to execute the document, or the building commission, excuse me, to execute the document.
So if this is passed in good faith, and then the state changes the term or something like that, that resolution, that would be our chance to,
Right.
I mean, we should confirm the supplemental resolution comes back to council and not the building commission.
Right.
So remember, the building commission is the one doing the lease, so we still need,
And the other thing, and
And you'll-
I know John's raised this issue a couple of times. You always wonder, well, what happens if we get a new governor, we get a new legislature, and they want to change the policy of IJDC loans going forward? There's a long-settled law in this country and in West Virginia, a deal's a deal. You can't retroact, you can change something going forward, but if the deal's been executed, that deal's in place, and those terms can't be changed. And that's private law as well as a government contract. So, we get this thing buttoned down, if we get there, again, we got to have a DEP permit. Nobody's going forward without it, so.
Ahoy.
And go ahead. No, I didn't. I was just going to ask if anybody had any more questions.
More questions.
On this topic.
Thank you. I wanted to go back to what you were talking about, and you said that the Infrastructure and Jobs Development Council is providing grants, loans. It is still doing that currently, correct?
Yeah, what happens, if you read the statute, all of the funds are under the control of the IJDC, and they have a board. But the way this works, for this 20%, those requests for funds, the applicant fills out the application, but the request comes from the West Virginia Development Authority. They're the ones that give the thumbs up or the thumbs down on this thing. Now, theoretically, the IJDC could still turn the thing down. The State Economic Development Authority could recommend something, and they have the authority to say no. But that's normally not the way it works. They vet these things out, and that's how the process works.
Well, here's, having you just said that, tell me where I'm wrong here. We take the option 6 hybrid. We build the biggest pipe we can possibly build, $10 million free money from the state. We now have 3.9 miles of space on both sides, basically, to fill with this stuff. We've built the spine, the backbone. The Development Council, Jobs and Development Council, plan to put a 1,000-acre industrial park, whatever, here in Jefferson, or Eastern Panhandle. We'll assume it's Jefferson County. They have 610 acres without the orchard site, and if you back the 150 of the Rockwell out of the 390 of the site, that gives you 140. You add that to 610, so you got 750 acres that the West Virginia Infrastructure and Jobs Development Council is looking to then put industrial things on that site. Ranson and the county basically have basically blown up their, whether they're zoning or they've blown up their comprehensive plans to accommodate Rockwool. So why not put something else in there? And what's to say that the equivalent of a cement plant, as is up there in Martinsburg with the great big, really ugly smokestack, or a 2-mile, 3-mile long P&G wants to move into this county. What then is to stop them from asking for a loan from the West Virginia Infrastructure and Jobs Development Council to put a main line or an alternative main line extension into our spine along in somewhere in that 3.9 miles?
I'm not aware of anything. I mean, I understand your angst. You know, obviously we have no control over the West Virginia Economic Development Authority.
But should it be our angst that we have a responsibility to consider what is going to be developed in those 3.9 miles?
Not in our jurisdiction. How are we going to do that?
How are you going to do it? I understand what you're saying, and as the councilman just said, you know, I feel everybody's pain in this thing, and I've looked at it from the start, and I've told Kristen and Jane, I said, you know, we've done this, what I think is a good thing, to consolidate these utilities. Charlestown has less discretion in what it's doing in this issue, which is sewer, than any other body in the county. And yet, you know, and we understand why the folks who are concerned about Roxville have come to us, because you're the last peg that hadn't been knocked down. And it's unfortunate, but it is. I mean, you've got 5 municipalities in a county, all of which have zoning, and essentially you have Ranson and Charlestown in the county. You know, you all are the big enchilada. You've got all these issues surrounding this. I call it the greater Charlestown-Ranson area. It's not just the incorporated areas. It's the unincorporated areas that surround the two municipalities. And I don't know how to do it. I don't know. It's obviously beyond the utility board. And all I know is that the two city councils in the county have got to continue to work towards some common solution. I don't know what it is.
So, Councilman Tolbert, if I could just correct one thing that you said. This is no longer Ranson doing this project. This is now Charlestown doing this project. As we've just been told, this is now our application to the Infrastructure and Jobs Development Council. And the language that you read earlier is on third page of the application, brief description of proposed project. And so now I'm going to read that, and I'm simply going to sub in City of Charlestown for Ranson. The West Virginia Infrastructure and Jobs Development Council is seeking to bring a 1,000-acre industrial park to the Eastern Panhandle region. In support of this goal, the City of Charlestown and the Jefferson County Development Authority have successfully negotiated an agreement to bring Roxville Inc., a manufacturer of cement-based insulation materials, to a 150-acre site on the west side of the 390-acre Jefferson Orchard property annexed into the city in 2004. The Jefferson Orchard property lies within city limits just north of the city's urban growth boundary at the intersection of West Virginia Route 9 and Northport Road, see attached. So this is ours. And so if we approve these bonds, and we're going to say that we own this project and that this is our application, we now own the industrialization of a 1,000-acre site up there. And so we can't just any longer...
No,
that's very
not at all.
inaccurate.
Not at all.
That is not
located-
true.
If you want a sewer system, that is more than
It's
just...
our
Whoa,
application.
whoa, whoa, whoa. Okay, wait, one at a time. Mr. Zaglifa, go ahead.
Yield to Mr. George.
We own a sewer system. That loan is for more than a sewer system.
What
It
is
is.
it for more than a sewer system?
Sewer, water, road.
No, those are three different applications.
Okay,
This is
still,
only
we
the
own a
application
sewer
for the
system.
sewer. They switched that because they couldn't abide by the...
Mike.
I'm sorry he's wrong. This is not for sewer, water, and roads. This is for sewer.
Okay. Mr. Zaglifa.
I'm done.
Well, I asked the question originally, and I do.
But
And
in all
I know,
honesty-
yes, I know, but in 1941, what is now the Letterkenny Army Ordnance Depot was supposed to be in Jefferson County. It was supposed to take up a ninth of the county land in Jefferson County. And it would not have touched Charlestown because it was deep into the county, Kearneysville, Summit Point. Basically would have paved over and put igloos in there. It was right before World War II. And it was Charlestown and other people in the county effort that said no to that. 50s and the 40s, there was a whole series of dams. They were basically going to dam the Shenandoah River. And it would have started from Millville all the way up past your thing and basically put large portions of Clark County underwater. That was stopped. Something that was going on in the county that didn't touch Charlestown was also stopped by the county folks, but also by Charlestown folks. My question is, and I know legally we don't have, maybe we don't have the legal right to argue about development that's in the county and all like that, but where is our responsibility to consider what is coming into our county, because it is our county. It's not just Charlestown, it is our county. We pay our taxes to the county, we receive benefits from the county, we vote on things for the county, but when it comes to what that area is out there, we're being told, oh, you can't touch that, it's not your responsibility.
If I could say, though, as a citizen of Jefferson County, I would say it is our responsibility. As an elected body representing Charlestown, the issue before us happens to be sewer to a customer. My personal feelings are, I wish they were building their plant somewhere else. I really do. But the issue before us, as citizens of Jefferson County, yeah, we have a responsibility. As an elected body, the issue before us is sewer. And what we have to, I think we're responsible to our constituents, number one, and to the ratepayers of this utility, number two. And if we say, because we don't want this particular customer here, that we're not going to vote for this bond, and that's the reason we're not going to vote for it, then I think we're failing our constituents in Charlestown. We may be failing our constituents in Charlestown, and we may be failing the ratepayers. That's the consideration I think that we all need to look at. We all need to weigh this. If I had a magic wand, we would go back 2 years and they could ask Bob Traynor, hey, we're going to put this plant here. And I'd say, no, you're not. And if I had the authority, they wouldn't. That's not where we are. And that's not what our job here today is. As citizens, yeah, absolutely. Citizens of Jefferson County, we have a responsibility to do what's best for the county. Again, I think we need to remind ourselves what we're doing here in this body and what we're responsible for here in this body with this issue.
Again, I use the example. It's 7-2 offsuit, okay? Those are the cards we're dealt with. It's a lousy hand, but we can't fold. And we can thank the dealers up the road. That's who gave us those cards, okay? So I don't mind going over across the tracks and complain to the dealer that I got 7-2 offsuit. All right, but those are the cards that we're dealt with, and we have to make the best that we can. And we just can't fold. You know, it's as simple as that. And we can't dictate, those are the cards. We can't dictate what industry goes over that property if it's outside the city limits. We can't. The deal before us is sewer. Okay? It's as simple as that. I don't understand why it's so complicated. You know, and that's what's frustrating. Okay? I'm sorry, but I left the house at 5:30 this morning. I have not seen my family. I have been here almost 2.5 hours. And we have accomplished, unfortunately, absolutely nothing. None of my questions that I might have had there have been no new revelations. Nothing has changed from when I walked in here at 5 o'clock today. There's been no information, nothing new. Oh my goodness, I didn't even think of that. Absolutely nothing. Nothing has changed there. No, I'm incredibly frustrated, and I'm asking all of you for help, and what did I miss? What new earth-shattering piece of information did we learn today?
I think I'm glad we had this because it did answer some questions that I had. One of them is there's a 5-5 option that won't cost the ratepayers any money. Okay, I didn't really realize that was the case.
But unfortunately, it won't, because that will never happen. I understand, yes, we did have a better understanding of it.
Information, and I'll tell you what, and here's the thing, it's as annoying and as tedious as these things can be, we're going down every avenue, we're hammering out every question, and if that is what it takes to make sure we make the right decision, then so be it. I know, like I said, it's tedious and it's a pain in the neck, and again, we had some, in my opinion, we had some questions answered that I had, for example, and maybe it's not anything.
I apologize for my frustration, but bottom line, I asked a question months ago. Is there a way to turn down the state financing without a risk to ratepayers? I have yet to hear anything contrary to, that it's impossible. I have yet to hear anyone saying that, oh no, there's no risk at all if we vote this down. And I correct me if I'm wrong, but I have yet to hear that.
Can I ask, that's what we just heard, that if we turn down the state financing and Rockwell wants to build their line and they approach us as they have already done with a 5.5 request, that they can build that line and there's no impact to ratepayers. That's what we just heard.
Oh, Mike.
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 Okay, we're going in too many circles again here, fellas, and everybody's getting frustrated.
One more time, and that's it. I'm out of here. That is ridiculous. That is absolutely ridiculous, and that is absolutely ridiculous.
Okay, guys.
And it is ridiculous.
Kristen.
Why?
Yeah, I need to know why. I don't understand. Correct me. I don't understand.
Well, just to simply respond that if the line in a 5-5 is built only for Rockwool, the utility board will have to provide service to the industrial park and to the northern region. So you'd take the Flowing Springs project, let's just say, and we're going to have to provide improvements to that area, and that will cost the ratepayers.
Why would that cost the ratepayers? If somebody else wants to hook up to that, don't they have to go through the same?
Current customers. It's current customers.
No.
Current customers.
And we have to fix that problem.
Well, if
Rockwell line will fix some of those problems.
If you could, Kristen, if you could simply, and I hear you, Nick, but I disagree with you completely because we have heard new information here, and it's not been clear. And I would love to have the answers to my 16 questions answered so we can see
Okay,
what.
and we've already committed
that's
to
not gonna
that.
happen
We've already
tonight.
committed to having the utility board come back and make the justification for the project as they are recommending it. So we are moving on, guys, okay? Because the tension level's rising, and I don't think we're getting anywhere with that. So our last agenda item is 3206, manufacturing waste, and
I have a couple more questions not related to anything we've talked about with the state financing package.
okay. How many more questions? Can we get through them in maybe 5 minutes?
Honestly, I thought the purpose of this and the purpose of having it on its dedicated night and the purpose of starting early was so that we could discuss this for however long it took for everybody to get their questions so that nobody could be accused after this of saying, hey, why didn't you ask that at that meeting? That's where your opportunity was.
Okay, I'll give you another 10 minutes, Mike. Hopefully we can get through it, but we do need to move on.
And this might be more for Hoy. The building commission is not a utility. How do they not have to apply to the PSC to build a sewer line?
We don't have to apply to the PSC.
The line is actually being built by Charlestown and then turned back over to them.
Well,
They are simply holding title to it. The operation of the system, maintenance, so forth and so on, will be undertaken by Charlestown through the Charlestown Utility Board.
yes, I understand, but the building commission owns the sewer line when it's built, correct?
It will when it's built.
And so,
But it does not fall under the jurisdiction of the PSC because Charlestown is the underlying body here.
but isn't
But the building commission is an outgrowth. I mean, it's a tool that you all use to do certain things with, just like you use the utility board to do certain
I
things
understand.
with.
But isn't the building commission its own corporation?
It does, yes, it is, but it is not, it does not need approval of the Public Service Commission to do what it's doing. It just does not.
Well, the other
I mean,
thing
you-
that may
this,
be,
you're not, I don't know I don't know if there are any other building commissions in the state, John would know this, John Stump, that are used for utility projects. My expectation is the answer is yes, but I don't know that. But
So-
it is, but it does not require Public Service Commission approval.
so if I could say, so it is the Charlestown Utility Board, let's make sure we understand that. It is a component unit of the city, and it's included in the city's financial.
That's correct.
Yep.
The building commission has other lease revenue. It's not an
Well, of course, but not other lease revenue bonds to build a utility line.
No, but for other purposes,
Yeah, I'm not saying that they can't issue bonds. I understand that they can issue bonds.
I thought the building commission was because of the bond issue, because of the current bonds we have.
Yeah, John can get into this more than I can. I don't want to steal his thunder. But one of the issues we've had in this thing is to make sure this is not a parity bond, that it does not affect your existing debt. And so, that was one of the reasons we wanted to separate it. It made it an awful lot easier to explain it to our bondholders, and try to make sure that it is not on parity with your existing debt, water and sewer.
Well, because CTEB would never be allowed to finance this, correct?
That's right. Yeah.
And I guess that's my concern with going the building commission route, is why are we obligating the building commission to build something, a sewer line, for the utility that they would never be able to receive the financing to build themselves? Because it doesn't meet their debt coverage requirements.
Well, I don't know what to tell you. If I'm not mistaken, and John, the revenue and so forth on this thing will be in the financial statements of the utility board.
I'm not, to answer your question, Mike, I think the utility board, would be possible for them to finance the project. The reason why the building commission is used, as Floyd pointed out, is the protect the utility board from those parity issues, debt service coverage issues, things like that. Again, the building commission has other bonds outstanding, are secured by lease revenues from the city.
No, I understand, but I'm looking at John Stump's email to the IJDC, and he says that he can't figure out any other way to do it other than the building commission route, because we cannot use an alternate mainline extension agreement, as it would require PSC approval, ensuring that the debt is not included in the coverage calculation, and excluding the Route 9 line extension from the lien on the system as provided to the existing bondholders.
Correct.
Right, I think you have to restructure the debt somewhat. That's not to say that Charlestown Utility Board could not
And then the IJDC had some concern about that exact thing, and Sammy G from the IJDC said that John Stump wasn't authorized or approved to go the building commission route. So she had heartburn with it. And so I guess that gives me heartburn with it.
They
that-
had heartburn with it, and they worked it out. I don't know what else to tell you. I know, the email traffic. I
I
think
get it. This was from December, though.
Yeah.
We were going to vote on this thing and make the building commission vote on it in August, 4 months prior to that.
you have to speak with her, but I'm certain now that she's on board with it. I talked to her as recently as yesterday.
Okay.
Well, I have a,
Who is this person?
Sammy G, she's the bond counsel, I believe bond counsel
She
for
is
IJDC.
she's a partner at Jackson Kelly, and she represents the IJDC and the Water Development Authority.
Sammy G? Is that-
Sam, Sammi,
Okay.
Well-
female.
Well, Hoy,
A pretty good lawyer, too.
I have a,
Well, wait a minute, did you have some other
Are
questions?
you
That was
done
it
with
for
your
me.
I was
questions?
just,
For that, I mean, if you have some,
I'll pop this
Well,
one
we're
question
going to
up.
move on, so are you done yet or not? Do you have more?
I mean, I can ask more, but if Councilman Tolbert has something related, I'd rather him ask it now.
That's fine. Go ahead.
It's a general
going on
question. And I have a 5-hour commute, 2.5 hours each way. And when I come in here, I try to be serious and have questions. And if I have questions that I don't know the answer to, I ask. I don't watch the building commission's meetings. We keep talking about the building commission. What has the building commission, what are they doing? What do they understand their role is? Where are they going?
They're waiting for us.
Right.
They're waiting for
We
us.
discussed that. They're waiting to find out what council's direction is.
And will,
Right, so remember what council's act is, the motion for council is to authorize the building commission to issue the bonds and to enter into a lease agreement. I mean, that's ultimately what council is going to act upon. So, as the chairwoman said, they're waiting for council to say, we authorize you to do the following. So right now, we're working to try to arrange a meeting for them on March 5th.
and they're comfortable with that.
I mean,
We'll find out when they vote on March 5th, but
and we've been keeping them apprised of developments, and as we've gotten documentation regarding the project, we've been sharing that information with the building commission. So, I mean, and we have invited them to be a part of the meeting on the 4th, so they'll be in attendance. They can hear the conversation. They can hear where council is. They can hear the questions that you're asking still.
Do they have any latitude? I mean,
They do.
they do.
I mean, at the end of the day, their vote is an independent vote.
I think John Stump told us about a building commission that said no to something, I think, at one time, but I thought, what are the parameters of what our building commission?
it's certainly an outcome and not something we haven't discussed before. I mean, that could put us into some kind of alternative financing arrangement. We don't know exactly what that looks like until we act, and then they act, if they need to act after we act.
The city, of course, appoints the members of the building commission. They're an independent body.
Right. Of course.
Much like our utility board.
Anything more on this topic? Okay, great. Let's move on to our last one here for the evening. 3206, and this is the one that really got me excited when I saw it. Manufacturing waste. Let's take it up, 7:30. Go, Kristen.
So I think the genesis of this question is regarding floor drains and the plumbing plans within the facility. So we have been corresponding with Rockwool requesting the plumbing plans. They are working through those, finalizing those. You know, they will be required to submit those documents to the city of Ranson. They've committed to providing a copy of those to us once they get those finalized. They're anticipating on doing that in April. So, I'm not sure what the specific questions are, but, going back to the original information that they had provided to us, it was very clear that there are essentially two distinct parts of the building. They had provided a process diagram which talked about the domestic waste and the industrial waste that would be entering into our sewer system. The other portions of the manufacturing that they will be doing within their plant are totally 100% self-contained and would not be entering into our sewer system. I mean, it gets back to the limitations, the flow restrictions that we've incorporated in the sewer user agreement and the NPDES permit. So certainly happy to address any other questions, but, you know, I don't have specifics, unfortunately, within their footprint, other than the commitments that they've made and the responses that we have provided to them as well.
So I think my concern with that particular revelation is, so if these processing bays or rooms or whatever they're called have deck drains where some of the processing stuff goes into these deck drains, and that goes into the domestic side of the sewer flow. Because I've been hearing for the last months, you know, people coming in saying we got all this stuff is going in the water and all that. And we're looking at the permit, right? The permit modification. It doesn't have, like, it doesn't address any of that stuff. And I'm not saying the permit modification is wrong. But so I'm wondering is, if there's processes going on in these bays or these rooms with deck drains, where do those deck drains go? And what's, you know what I'm saying? Is there a way to say, okay, well, this is what's in, like, let's say they're hosing down something, I don't know what they're doing, but, okay, well, this is the flow, and this is what's in the flow, and where is that flow going, I guess. That, to me, that's the concern. Now, if it's already covered, if they're saying, oh, well, in this one where we got nitric oxide or some crazy stuff like this, and it's going into here, and we've covered that in the permit modification, fine, but I'm not sure that that's been covered. Like I said, I've heard all these things from all these concerned citizens, and a lot of them have done a lot of research saying, you know, there's this stuff going on in the water, and this stuff going on in the water, and you need to check this out. So the only thing I can figure is possibly it's something other than the reverse osmosis process. And then couple that with the numbers that we got from Mississippi. You know, is that what's going on in Mississippi? I don't know. It's kind of maybe a stretch or whatever. I guess we need to know, as a utility, exactly what's going into the stream. Is that part of the stream? And then if it is, what is it? It's not basically just your household waste. You know what I mean?
Right. I consider the NPDES permit minor modification very clear as to what is coming into our sewer line.
Is that basically reverse osmosis process?
It is reverse osmosis, a water softening system, and the domestic waste associated with toilets, bathrooms, sinks, those sorts of things. The permit does address the separate and distinct manufacturing processes that will not be entering the sanitary lines.
Okay, so
You know, I did bring an example of, again, a way for us to monitor that and quantify that. DEP will set restrictions on testing the effluent within the line. So we will be required to do that. What they'll set the time frame, whether it's a weekly basis, a monthly basis, quarterly basis. We are required to.
Permit modification?
Yes, DEP sets those standards.
That will be in the permit modification then?
Yes, yes. So, for instance, you know, all of the other industrial users that we now have on our permit have clear limitations as to, you know, metals testing, flow testing, all of those parameters and the times that they need to be tested. Those are sent to laboratories and then uploaded every month within our permit.
So from an engineering perspective, so we have two flows. I'm just going to visualize it as two streams, and they're going into one stream. I'm thinking that we're going to be monitoring the flow from the reverse osmosis stream, and we're going to be monitoring the flow from the domestic stream. Is that?
Yes, there are samplers, so that actually it's equipment that takes the samples from each of those two lines, and that is what will be submitted to DEP as part of our records.
So we'll take samples and measure flow?
Yes.
Okay, and then it joins into one, and then it's on the way to Charlestown?
Yes.
Okay, and we're pretty confident that all these quote-unquote deck drains are not going to be part of the domestic stream? Or if they are, we know what's coming out of there?
Right, yes, there are two distinct processes within the plant. One is what we're considering entering into our stream. The manufacturing processes are totally 100% contained, not entering in our system.
Oh, so the deck drains are not going into the stream?
There may be floor drains in the portion that contains the reverse osmosis, but those, yes, I mean, they're, the two processes
Like
are
this
separate
paint
and
thing,
distinct.
for example, painting the, they were talking about painting the ceiling tiles and all that kind of stuff.
Again, that's part of
Know
a
anything
future,
about that
On the line.
future permit that we will evaluate.
So, for instance, so I had brought this up to Councilman Trainer in regards to the plumbing plans that were submitted to the fire marshal's office over a year ago. They were about 30% complete at the time. And in that, it calls for 10 different manufacturing industrial rooms that have drains in them. Where do those drains go?
What has been explained to us is that there are treatment measures within the manufacturing portion of the facility where those would be disposed of in accordance with other permits not associated with the utility board.
But they haven't applied for any other permits. I mean, we know that. I mean, we've got these groups
I
out there
think right, I mean,
monitoring them nonstop. We know
They're
that they don't.
finalizing their architecturals and their plumbing plans. Those may be
And so,
through,
well, one of the other aspects is it calls for 5 to 6 floor drains, and it says 5 to 6 floor drains shall discharge to the dirty rainwater system in the flue gas plant. Now, the flue gas plant is where everything heats up and it's going out a smokestack, and apparently what happens is it creates this highly acidic condensate that condenses in the room because of the heat and the temperature, and that apparently just gets piped to their stormwater management ponds.
those facilities are containment areas that may have pretreatment, again, not going into our sanitary lines.
Yeah, but they've told us that that water flows, they're going to be using that water, boop, right back into their plant, which then comes into our lines when it's done.
No, actually, they've been very clear about the stormwater is a totally separate process, not going into our sanitary lines.
I guess my question is, what due diligence have we done, other than just simply them saying it to us, that we believe that? I mean, none of the, when they gave us our diagram.
Set all of the parameters within the permit and the sewer user agreement that protect us.
No, I understand, Kristen,
Monitor.
but for instance, when we got their sewer bills from Byhalia, and admittedly, it showed 400% higher than what they're telling us. What steps did we take did Charlestown Utility Board take to follow up on that?
The response that we got, I think, was there was an error and they were evaluating that. I don't think the two are connected. It appeared to be an issue with their billing down there. I think that we have all of the provisions that protect us in the event that they exceed by 10 times.
I just think that's tough. When I called down to the DEP in Mississippi, they made it very clear that they have no authority whatsoever to check what comes out of the domestic lines, that they can only regulate what Mississippi.
Okay, but West Virginia, we absolutely do. I can tell you that our permitting requirements are very, very extensive and very, very detailed. Happy to provide you, actually, I did print a copy of our monthly submission to DEP with all of our permitting parameters. It's a very involved process and highly evaluated. We go through inspections every year where they go through all of our records.
But so you would know, before phase 1B and phase 2 and all that stuff come on, you're going to know, based on your flow meters and your testing, if the flows are greater, right? And
Yes.
then that raises a flag and you go, I'm assuming.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes, yes.
So I'm kind of hoping that that's the case, because you're telling me that's the case, and it makes sense to me. But I am reminded of the folks out here by the golf course that have their stormwater going into the sewer system. And so we're like scrambling to try to figure out how that's
If we
happening.
had flow meters on each of those laterals, that would be
True.
great.
No, I got
But, you know, these flow meters and these testing parameters protect us, and they are, you know, they will be evaluated. We will know in the month following the connection as to what we're dealing with, if there's any cause for concern.
I think kind of the reason all these questions are coming up over the past few months, and it's because of, you know, obviously the public outreach to us, but also the information that we've been getting from the customer. It's been kind of all over the place, and so.
Totally agreed, yes.
In some cases, to Mike's point is, I mean, can we trust them? I think that it's either a case of duplicity, which I don't think, or just gross incompetence, which may be the case. So I would just stress, no matter how this turns out, that if and when they become our customer, we have to be diligent to make sure that they're following the parameters that we as utility, or you as utility, have set forth.
Absolutely, which is, you know, again, why we have sent out sewer user agreements to all of the industrial users that the PSD had. We take it very seriously and will monitor everything that comes into our system.
The last thing I'll say, I guess probably for the day, I would really encourage you guys to take a look at your processes. I find it really odd and inadequate that we don't request plumbing plans from a customer before we build a $10 million sewer line to them. I've built a fence in this town, and I had to submit my plat of my house before I got approved for it. I recently built a building in Loudon. It was the first thing that the city asked me for was plumbing plans. The utility department used it to calculate my tap size. I mean, they came in, they did fixture counts. And so, like I said, I find it really odd. I don't feel like that's much due diligence that, I mean, how do we even know where to run the sewer line to their building if we don't know where their outlet is? I mean, simple things like that, it just seems strange not to have somebody's sewer plan or plumbing schematics before we build them a $10 million sewer line.
Well, wouldn't they have to have those for the building permit, right?
Well, yes, for the building permit, absolutely. This project is going to the Rockwell property line. Obviously, I think we've done absolutely the due diligence that we need to, and we've set the parameters in place that we can monitor and evaluate what's coming into the sewer system. You know, if a Starbucks comes in or a housing development, you know, we go through the plans, we evaluate the sewer lines and the details and the construction requirements. All of that is evaluated in accordance with our standards.
Anybody have any more questions for Kristen on this topic?
I do want to say thank you for spending the time answering the questions. Appreciate that and the research that you've done. And John?
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. So we have some follow-up items, which I think our city manager has a list of. Anything else before I ask for a motion to adjourn? I don't hear anything else, so I'll ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I'll second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Thanks, guys. Good night, everyone.